Okay, we're going to talk about the next subtopic, which is, again, aid from France for the Americans. And we mentioned yesterday that the American victory at Saratoga, thanks to Timothy Murphy's great shot in shooting British General Simon Fraser, was a turning point in the Revolutionary War, because this was the victory that convinced France that the colonists might just have a chance to win the war for independence. And they are obviously enemies with Great Britain, that being France. And so now that they think that the Americans have a chance to win, they're eager to join the side. So who do you think the King of France invited to France to try to talk about an alliance between France and America? You think George Washington? No, he was busy fighting. Benjamin Franklin. Very good. So the King of France welcomes Benjamin Franklin to his country to talk about an alliance between France and America. So the King of France, after the Battle of Saratoga, the King of France welcomes Benjamin Franklin over to his country, and they start talking about alliances between the United States and France. And on February 6th of 1778, February 6th of 1778, the American colonies and France signed two treaties. On February 6th, 1778, the American colonists and France signed two treaties. The first treaty was a commercial treaty. What do you think that had to do with? Not television commercials. Trade. Both sides agreed to give each other favorable treatment in the matters of trade. So the first treaty signed on February 6, 1778, between the American colonists and France was a commercial treaty in which both sides agreed to give each other favored treatment in matters of trade. Treaty of Alliance was a treaty of alliance. And what this treaty of alliance stated, really two things: that France agreed to recognize the independence of the American colonies. So in the treaty of alliance, it really resulted in two things. First, France agreed to recognize the independence of the American colonies. France agreed to recognize the independence of the American colonies. Agreed to recognize the independence of the American colonies. And the second party of that Treaty of Alliance was France agreed to wage war upon Great Britain until America was free. The second part of the Treaty of Alliance was that the French agreed to wage war upon Great Britain until the American colonies were free. Agreed to wage war upon Great Britain until the American colonies were free. Now, other than the commercial treaty and the Treaty of Alliance, the two sides also promised a few things to each other. A couple things. First of all, America promised something to France, and that was that they would defend the French West Indies. They would defend, the American colonies said they would defend the French West Indies. So, in addition to this commercial treaty of alliance, America promised to defend the French West Indies. Those were the West Indies colonies that were owned by the French, and we agreed to defend those, just like they were our own colonies, so to speak. And both the United States and France promised each other that they would not make a separate peace with Great Britain. Both France and the United States promised that neither side would make a separate peace. In other words, the only way they'd make peace with Great Britain is if they both did. Very good. They agreed not to make a separate peace with Great Britain. Now, even though we got a great victory at Saratoga, Washington troops were in bad shape. They were poorly equipped, they were sick, they were hungry, they weren't in very good shape. And so what France is going to do, and this doesn't happen overnight, but in the next years, the French is going to show us with soldiers, supplies, and a modern equivalent of $13 billion. Not $13 billion, but what you would consider now. Okay? So France was going to now shower the colonists with soldiers. They were going to provide French soldiers. They were going to send supplies, which would include things to eat, things to keep you warm, and weaponry, right? And they were going to supply money, the modern equivalent of $13 billion. So again, recognize it wasn't $13 billion then. It was the modern equivalent, about $13 billion now.
So French soldiers, weapons.
So they would shower the colonists with soldiers, supplies, which would include weapons and clothing and food, and the modern equivalent of $13 billion. Now, there were a couple other countries that gave aid to the Americans, not at such a high magnitude, but did give aid. Anybody want to guess? Spain was one.
Netherlands?
The Netherlands was the other. Spain and the Netherlands were the other two. Spain and the Netherlands. You guys don't know Callie Klinghagen. This gal is awesome. There's your balance sheet. Okay, thank you, my dear. Got one right here. Let's get her going.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
Been on here now.
Actually, they're tremendously larger these. Refrigerator will take.
Will do.
There you go. You want to take that video?
Thank you, Mr.
All right. Now, that was very good. I was not expecting to get the Netherlands. Nice job there, Nick. So Spain and the Netherlands gave us support. Now, probably the most important thing that came from France wasn't so much the money that was important, but the person they got, the young officer by the name of Marquis de Lafayette. He was a young officer that came from France, and he's going to provide great leadership to the Continental Army. So one of the biggest contributions that France made to the American cause and the American Revolution came as a young officer by the name of Marquis de Lafayette. Very, very quality person, great leader, and he will do some things to turn the Continental Army around to be a much better. What? What's that? Yeah. Is it named after him, you think? Any questions on that subtopic? Aid from France for the Americans. Okay, that's going to take us to our last subtopic of this test material, which is entitled A Cold Winter at Valley Forge for the Continental Army. Because winter's coming up, right? Winter's coming up. Actually, some of these, yeah, it's upon us. Yeah, some of these people were already dug in for the winter. Unfortunately for them, Rahl and his men, the Hessians. So, here's where we are. Now I want to go back. I told you that the treaty was signed on February 6, 1778 that allowed France to help us. And like I mentioned, this didn't come to America overnight. So now we're going to back up, and it's the end of 1777. It's December of 1777. And what happened after Saratoga, which happened in 1777, right, is Franklin then to France, and he didn't sign this treaty overnight. Okay, does that make sense? He didn't sign the treaty overnight. What he did is he negotiated it, and it was in February of 1778 in which it went into effect. So we're going to spend a period of time here. Hi, my dear. We're going to spend a period of time freezing our rear ends off, us being the Continental Army, waiting for this negotiation to happen. What I mean by the cold winter at Valley Forge for the Continental Army. Okay, let's take a little bit of a survey. As 1777 winds down, let's talk about how America's doing. Even though we had this big victory over Saratoga. How about, anybody know what the capital of the American colonies is at this time, by the way?
Philadelphia?
Philadelphia. Okay, so America's capital of Philadelphia has fallen to the British. Okay, late in 1777, Philadelphia is in British hands, and Washington's army, even though they got the victory at Saratoga, his army is unraveling. Okay, they're unraveling. Now, Valley Forge is just 20 miles northwest of Philadelphia. And that's where Washington's 11,000 soldiers are trying to survive a horrible winter. Okay? So just 20 miles northwest of Philadelphia, 11,000 American soldiers are at Valley Forge trying to survive a horribly bad winter. Horribly bad winter. Now, I want to see if you understand this. The reason it's going to be such a bad winter is the supply system broke down. The supply system to Valley Forge broke down. What do I mean by the supply system broke down? They're not getting any supplies. That route of supplies, so to speak, isn't coming anymore. Okay? So they're not getting any supplies. It broke down. Okay? A government issue. So the supply system, or the system of supplying those soldiers in Valley Forge, broke down. So they don't have any supplies there. They don't have any medicine. They don't have any blankets. And more importantly, they don't have much food. So these got 11,000 soldiers are stuck at Valley Forge for the winter. No medicine, no supplies, no blankets, no food. And they are so desperate that the men are eating tree bark and melting snow for drinking water. That's how tough it is at Valley Forge. The men are eating tree bark and they're melting snow for drinking water. Now, some of them don't have any shoes, some of them don't have proper clothing. Valley Forge was virtually an ice box. Many soldiers froze to death or died during that winter. Matter of fact, of the 11,000 soldiers at Valley Forge, they estimate about 2,500 died by either freezing to death or disease. So it was a bad, bad winter, and it's getting worse. Okay? So they figured that about 2,500 of the 11,000 soldiers at Valley Forge will die during this harsh winter. Well, Washington's in tough shape. The supply system, Congress is trying to fix it, but it's going to take time. Washington doesn't have any time. If he doesn't get food now for his men, they're going to be wiped out to a man. And while he's worried about this, he has no idea that a rescue party is heading his way. He has no idea. He's watching men drop. He's watching men suffer, freeze, starve to death, die of disease. And he knows that these supply lines to getting to his supplies are going to take some time. He's just in bad shape. But what he doesn't know is he doesn't know that there's a rescue party heading his way. And it's under the leadership of, surprisingly, an Oneida war chief. Make sure you get this right. An Oneida war chief by the name of Han Yeri. Han Yeri. So, unbeknownst to Washington, a rescue party is heading his way under the leadership of Oneida War Chief Han Yeri. Now, this is kind of interesting because a lot of people don't know these. The Oneida Indians actually were the first ally of the colonial cause. They were the first ally. It wasn't the French, wasn't the Netherlands. It was the Indians who became the first ally of the colonial cause. When Han Yeri had a choice to choose either the Patriots or the British during the war, he chose the Patriots. He chose the Patriot cause. Why would he do that? What would be the determining factor? And I try to do this when I teach it. Every decision I try to make in this class is in what? The best interest of you. And Han Yeri made the decision to support the American cause because at that point he believed that was best for his people, was in the best interest of his people. Turned out to be right, didn't he? Who knows what had happened if he'd have turned out to be wrong, just like these American colonists that were concerned about what would happen if they lose. But Han Yeri makes the decision that he and his tribe will fight on the colonial side because he truly believes this will be in the best interest of his people. So what Chief Yeri does is he and his warriors carry 600 bushels of white corn to Valley Forge. They carry 600 bushels. Any farmers in here? Buck, you're a farmer, aren't you? How much is 600 bushels? Does anybody do? Anybody in here? Okay, anybody do bushel work here? I'm trying to figure out how many of those big trucks it would be. What's a bushel? It'd be a lot, right? But they don't have trucks, they're carrying it. And you know how many miles they're traveling from where they're grabbing the corn and bringing it to? 400 miles. White corn, 400 miles. So what happens is Chief Yeri and his warriors are going to carry 600 bushels of white corn over 400 miles to Valley Forge. That's what they're doing. And what do they got to avoid along the way? The British and who else? Well, it could be loyalists, but who else? Other Indians that are their enemies. Because what are most Indian tribes supporting in this thing? The British. Okay? So not only do they have to travel 400 miles with 600 bushels of white corn, they have to travel lightly, so to speak, watch where they're going because they've got to avoid both British redcoats and enemy Indian tribes who are supporting the British. Well, they arrive, they avoid both the redcoats and their Indian enemies. They arrive, and the white corn is an absolute lifesaver for Washington's starving soldiers. Absolute lifesaver. And it allowed them to survive until what happened? The supply lines got fixed by Congress. Okay? So, here's another guy. How many people have ever heard of Han Yeri in the Revolutionary War? Here's another person that saved the day and helped us win our independence by bringing 600 bushels of white corn 400 miles through enemy territory, so to speak, to Valley Forge and saving the day for Washington's starving soldiers. Okay? Now, once these soldiers recover